Thank you for being with me, everyone who's here. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to see everyone. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who's online. Thank you all for being with me and inviting your friends. This is so exciting. Thank you to the silent source of the universe, of creation, being. Thank you to being for everything. Thank you for being this healing webinar and for being all the forms of creation which heal. Thank you for being all the forms of creation responsible for the flow of knowledge to the great eternal tradition of wisdom. Thank you to everyone who's here and to all of your ancestors. And when I do that, I'm really recognizing everyone at the level of the physical body, right? Because it's the ancestors that are responsible for that, their contribution. Thank you to the divine in all of us for blessing our time together so that we can work efficiently, effectively, powerfully, so that we can support everyone's ability to become self-sufficient and self-sustaining in the field of energy healing and to master that field. Thank you all for being with me. Okay, so getting my mouse out of the way there. Today's session, I believe, I have a page, around here somewhere. Hang on. Just a little reminder what we're doing today. Energy healing for relationships. Okay, that's easy. Right. So as I mentioned in the write-up on today's session, that the paradox in relationships is that we only have control over our own self and our own behavior, really, and we can't learn other people's lessons for them or do their actions for them. And so how is it that if a relationship naturally has two parties, right? Naturally has two. How is it if you only have control over one half of that picture that we can sort of guarantee harmonious relationships across the board? And I would say most people are interested not only in having good harmonious relationships, here we're laying out the sun cult, the seed of today's session, not only interested in having harmonious relationships, but interested in being able to most efficiently and most gracefully proceed on our own evolutionary path in the light of all the different relationships that we have, so that every relationship ends up enhancing or supporting the evolutionary process. That's like a win for everyone. Oh, and also, I always like to take a minute right at the beginning to do a little overview of what is energy healing, just for all the new people, and for the people who've been here before, just to enjoy what that is. So energy healing is about focusing attention intelligently. It is about, I was thinking about this morning. If we think of creation from the level of the physiology, which we're all familiar with, all the way to the finest, unmanifest, quality-less level of being, the field of energy healing is the field in between. Because at the level of the dense material, we can look around and see imperfections or areas that could be improved or the evolution that could be yet to be accomplished. And at the level of quality-less being, all solutions reside and all desires are fulfilled. And so somehow it's that gap between the relative level of creation and that level where all solutions, all resources, all knowledge, all fullness resides. So energy healing, we could say in a nutshell, is like kind of like the study of the area between unmanifest being and the relative field, and looking at how they interact and understanding the interface of consciousness, conscious awareness, with that area that supports the relative level of creation to be what it is. Okay, so usually people don't even think about that sort of subtle in-between level unless they get uncomfortable or unless something needs to be changed. Then there's that thinking, oh gee, I must have done something wrong or something's out of place, because things aren't going the way I'd like them to go. And that's when one starts looking into the deeper levels. Often the symptom or the discomfort on the surface is what drives a person in to look at those deeper levels. But what we're doing is we're jumping a little bit ahead of that, and we're going in and examining all those deeper levels of creation, how the unmanifest being manifests in different ways, so that we're ready for anything when it comes. It's like a kind of a meta solution for all problems. So today, the general focus is on relationships, and I don't want to deny that. I don't want to let that go. So so I mentioned before, we start out this process by asking the question, how is it that even if an individual can act in a responsible manner or act with integrity and honesty and so forth, how can we ensure that relationships are good when we can't always presume that others are acting from that same level of integrity, for example? One of the first principles I ever brought out, and I think it's very apt right here, is the principle of sacred gardens of the heart. So I think when we're talking about relationships, this is like a fundamental, and I'd like to just reiterate it. So at the surface of life, we see ourselves all separate physiologies and in our own little unique space. But when we go to the finer levels of being, what we know to be ourself, it expands. And boundaries are prevalent at the surface, but boundaries are less prevalent at the deeper levels of being. And of course, at the finest level of creation, at the field of unmanifest being, there are no boundaries. So we go from lots of boundaries to no boundaries. In that pyramid, or in that structure from all boundaries to no boundaries, there comes a point where our boundaries overlap with the rest of our reality and creation. And I was taking a deep dive into that today, and I was like, where exactly is the overlap? Where is that point where a person starts thinking, oh, this isn't just me as an individual, I am integrated with the rest of the creation. Now, sacred gardens of the heart reside at the causal level of creation. So we've got our y-axis, our diagram from very dense to very abstract, and the causal level is that finest manifest level of creation. So there, the physiology, our physiologies experience themselves as collectives and wholenesses. Because the closer you get to the field of absolute totality, the more you become like that, the more you look like that. So at the causal level, and I think on a previous webinar, we covered the 7 layers of the causal body, so I won't go back over that, but I would like to say that in the causal level of the physiology, there are locations that are precious or significant for every relationship that you have. So if we think for a minute, like a kind of little exercise, we can take a moment and think about some people that we really love. Like maybe a parent, one of our parents, or a child, or a romantic love, or a sibling, or somebody that you really love. And notice how that quality of love that you have with that person is very different from the quality of love that you have with anybody else. Each love is completely unique. So because of that, each love occupies a kind of sacred space within the field of consciousness at the causal level of the physiology. And so I call those sacred gardens of the heart. And we will return to that concept in a few minutes, because it's one of the important points in creating an adaptation which heals relationships. But at a slightly more manifest level, this is what came up today when I was walking with myself out in the forest. I took myself for a walk. And what I noticed is that the place where we start to become collective is actually the astral body. It's actually this one. So just a little review. These two levels at the deepest of my finger chart, the two deepest levels are the levels of being. We've got silent being folded in on its own nature, and we've got being awake to its own nature. And that's all unmanifest. Oh, more people are coming. Okay, but then we've got finest relative. Finest relative level is the causal body, and then just above that is the astral body. And the astral body is, we're going to work up from the inside out, because I want to work from the parts that you guys already know, okay, and to get up into the astral body. So in the gap between silent being folded in on its own nature and being awake to its own nature, right in that gap are all the resources for all energy healing. Everything is there, all the knowledge, all the forms of consciousness in like a potential not yet realized value are there. And the feeling there is like mother is at home. It's that lovely, warm, protected, safe, like all resources available and all love available. And then those resources are harnessed at the level of the causal body. That's where the resources become implemented to support the healing process. So the finest relative level of the physiology, which is collective in its nature, is able to utilize those resources to create sort of systemic effects in the field of consciousness, which give rise to specific results or symptoms at the surface. But just a layer above that is the astral body. And the astral level is really interesting because it has, first of all, that's the level where I find the perception of the web of life resides, the web of life. It's almost as if the causal body is a kind of a living force, you know, like all living beings or all the fine beings of creation, all the beautiful realms of creation. Like if you go into like a beautiful glade up on a mountain or something, and there's a kind of, it has its own personality, it has its own life force in it, its own spirit, you could say. But then the astral body is almost more like a mechanism a little bit. We could say it's where the laws of nature function as laws, very kind of consistent. There are more boundaries, obviously, at the astral level. And that's where all the cords or threads or streams of consciousness that flow through the creation reside at that level. And they're all inside our bodies, and they're everywhere. And the astral body is shaped kind of like a torus, kind of like these things on my head, kind of shaped like, kind of shaped like that. Around, it swirls like this, and it swirls like this around the body, this astral body. But it's comprised of these threads, fine threads of consciousness, and they interface with the threads in the web of life. So that's the spot where we start to actually feel or experience ourselves as very much an integrated part of the environment. That's the spot where you go, oh, I guess it's like it flips over from being like more individual to being more collective right at that spot. Between the next level that's above that would be the emotional body. And the emotional body, the body of feeling, the body of desire, is also where we speak the universal language of perception and experience, where we speak the level of feeling, and that is the universal language that all beings understand. So we could say from emotional all the way down to the causal level of the physiology, we're really working, that's the framework in which we would focus attention intelligently to activate the very best possible outcomes in relationships or through interactions with other people. All right. I'm just thinking this morning that it's like I was walking in the forest and I found that I love, there's so many little animals that are out right now, and usually animals are really frightened of people. But I've noticed that if one handles that universal language level of self effectively, the animals don't run away. They're actually curious. They'll actually come over and like want to say hi and things like that. I have to get my husband to bring the video with me next time I go out to the forest, and we can show conversations with the squirrels, things like that. Because yeah, right. Yeah, I always tempt. I don't carry nuts with me, but I carry plenty of love with me for the squirrels. So it's very sweet. Anyway, yeah, so the universal language of perception and experience, or we could call it the language of feeling, which is orchestrated by the heart, or the Hriddya Mahamarma, which is that big energy center that's right in the middle of the chest. So this is probably a good time, now that I've kind of laid out the framework for today's talk, this would probably be a really good time to do some healing for everybody. So this is the part where I don't have an agenda or a script or anything. Sorry. Okay. So I'm just looking into the field of everybody, just looking into the field energetically. And one of the things I'm seeing today, I'm just going to tell you as I'm reading it, calling it as I see it. I'm feeling in our group a kind of a lovely, rich, very sort of enthusiastic, excited feeling, like everyone's really happy to be here and we're ready to like do this. So thank you everyone for that. I love your level of engagement. Thank you so much. The other thing that I'm seeing for a lot of people is we've done a lot of work up in this area of the physiology, clearing up channels of inner communication, which was another area that I thought might be useful to touch on for today's talk. Because how can we communicate with other people if inside the channels of communication are blocked, right? So anyway, for a lot of people, we've done a lot of work in this heart-throat area, heart-throat-head area too. And it's lighting up, so I'm just describing. So there's a kind of an axis or a relationship between heart and head, and then there's another one between gut and heart, like that. And it kind of creates a sort of a figure eight type of effect like that. Or we can, if we just do it, my camera can only, those guys can only see me this far. So kind of like a figure eight like that, right? And then there's also another one that goes like that. And so I'm just checking in. Those are kind of like waking up and lively. They represent the mother of creation. These three main energy centers are our tie-in, or our connection, our intimate bond with the mother of creation. And so that's what's happening in our group as a collective. That as a collective, we're as if making an appeal or a recognition to the mother of creation, to the deepest level, that mother's at home level of our own silent being. So I think I'm just going to take a second and honor that. And as I'm doing that, I'm seeing heart chakras lighting up and heart mahamarmas lighting up, filling up with grace and sweetness. And the resonation that I'm seeing there is very pure. And the purity of that resonation is the same in your physiology as it is in the heart of the mother of creation. So I'm just going to go back into silence again and just let that expand a little bit. Feels like melting hearts. Melting hearts. There's a point where the melting of the heart becomes so enriched that it's almost as if the physiology can hardly take it. And at that point, the appropriate thing to do is to just let it flow back to the mother of creation. Just let it flow to the mother, let it flow to being, the source of being, because the source of being takes everything out to infinity anyway. So it spreads like a beacon of light. Our group is like a big collective beacon of light that's radiating that light out to the whole creation. And it's affecting the web of life. It's communicating a level of organized integration that we are exercising as a collective. This is new stuff for the web of life. Oh, there are all kinds of groups out there organizing this, that, and the other. But, and some people are getting together, you know, like in drum circles, or they're getting together and doing other kinds of crystal healings or different kinds of healings with the creation. But we're doing this completely on the level of consciousness alone, in a very simple, no equipment, just our physiologies. And so, so that's, the web of life has to make an adjustment because it's continually modifying its relationship with us based on what we do. So what's happening is there's that recognition, oh, there's a level of sophistication here because we're working at a very refined level. We're not working with anything other than just our consciousness. That's special. Okay. So I'm getting a download. It's beautiful. And so I do my best to describe to everyone. All the different parts of the nervous system responsible for different parts of the physiology, obviously. And if you go through the spine, you can see, you know, this spine here, the nerves that come out of this spine go to the stomach, and the nerves that come out of this spine go to the kidneys, and the nerves here and there all the way up and down the spine. But there's an area in the upper spine area that is connected to and associated with the awakening of awareness, expansion of consciousness, fulfillment of desires. This whole area up here, I've been studying it just this week. It's been very exciting for me that this area is responsible for regulation of a lot of desires, including like appetite regulation and regulation of other kinds of cravings and wants and things like that. And so part of the process of harmonizing our relationship with the environment is being able to put the evolutionary process ahead of relative desires, needs, and wants. If a person's able to make in a relationship, to make the quality of the interaction primary over and above, obviously, what you get out of the relationship from the other person, then for sure the relationship's going to go better. And that goes not only for relationships of individuals together, but also the individual, you, and the larger collective. And on that note, thank you. That's the download that's coming. I had to kind of like work into it because it was very abstract. The download that's coming has to do with our relationship as a collective with the web of life. And then from the web of life, there is this amazing, tremendous support system in the cosmos, in the stars, in the planets, in the solar systems, and in the galaxy, in the whole galaxy, and the many galaxies. There's that level of physiology correlates with the causal level of physiology, because the causal level of physiology is your collective level. So it is you. And this download for us is very powerful, because what it's really doing is it's offering us all a redefinition of self. It's offering us a sense of who we are that expands past the confines of the individual physiology and is supportive of a deep integration between individual force of self, force field, or personality, or field of energy being, with that ancient, eternal structure of self, which is ever part of us. It's ever part of us. It relates to cultural ethos. It relates to the kind of shifts that our culture takes from decade to decade. So these shifts are produced by us, but at the same time, we are also in them. So anybody here who's like, in the 1960s. I know you weren't. Or maybe in a previous incarnation. Yeah, right. The 1960s, you know, that feel of that time of the history of the world versus the feel of, say, the 2000s. Had a completely different feel to it, right? So each era has its own unique qualities that have been self-produced by us in perfect alignment with our cosmic intelligence. Because it can't come forward, and it can't come forward to support everyone unless it is intimately related to cosmic intelligence. Otherwise, it gets blocked. Because the whole Earth and all the planets are like moving through space, right? And so each area of space has its own energy frequency. And so it has to, what's going on with the collective has to line up with that. If it doesn't, then yucky stuff happens. Then stuff happens stuff happens that creates the need, that initiates a transformation, basically. You know, that's when we get the transformations and have to change. All right. We got a little bit away from relationships, but we got a cosmic download, so that was good. Maybe for some reason we needed that. We'll find out later in the session, obviously, as we go along. Keeps unfolding. So what's happening now is extremely delicate. This is still part of this healing. It's extremely delicate. It is a very tiny movement of consciousness at the very finest level of the causal body. Very, very delicate, right in that gap between unmanifest and manifest being. And there's a feeling of poignancy there. It's very delicate, but it's very like tender. And I feel that what's happening is this poignancy, this delicate move of consciousness is responsible for a very refined level of integration for everyone in our session, and anyone who watches the session later, for everyone, to bring together that in a way that the conscious mind can concretely accept it. That relationship between what we know ourselves to be as individuals in a single human lifetime, in a single human body, and the collective level of who we are. That cosmic self, call it cosmic self. I think it's not a coincidence that we put the crystal back here. Because as we all recall, that those who were here at the last webinar, we had some awakening or activation with mineralogical intelligence on Earth. And the thing about the minerals is they're old. And their physiologies, rather than 80 years or something, their physiologies go on long. They remember the rocks remember things like, you know, early formation of the planet and things like that. And so there's a forging of this deepening of the relationship between ourselves and our mineralogical brothers and sisters, if we want to call them that, because they can help us. They're like, this is something we can actually help you with. We can help you remember who you are. How precious. They're so precious. So feeling a little wave of appreciation and gratitude coming through our collective, going to all the rocks and all the minerals on the earth right now, and through them to the source of creation, but in a it's going in a roundabout way. It's going through the web of life, and it's going from the rocks and minerals into the core of the earth, and then from the core of the earth, it's extending out through that web of life to the cosmos. So it's touching lots and lots of forms between our hearts and the source of creation. It's touching it's going out and out and out and out and out and out and out. And that, again, that movement out, it's so tender. It's so delicate. It's almost like it's not even a movement. I love it. I love it that we're getting to do this now at this point in our session today. And the reason is that it brings me to a point that I think is really important when it comes to one-on-one relationships with other people, that we'd like to have success and fulfillment and joy in our relationships with others. So that is, we're kind of coming back to our original theme, which is, so we're only really responsible for ourselves. I so also just take this moment to honor and bow down to everyone in this session, because we're doing this together, that you've all chosen to be here and chosen to be part of this healing process. And I so sincerely appreciate that. I'm so grateful to you. So, and you, I'm so grateful to all of you, because when we're all on board doing the same thing at the same time, then it's super easy to get stuff accomplished. It's super easy to make these beautiful, delicate shifts. But sometimes we're working with people who don't want to, you know, they're like, no, they don't want to move forward. They don't want to fulfill their responsibilities. They don't feel like they're capable. They don't believe and trust in themselves, which I think even brings up a question that came up tonight. Low self-esteem and the need for approval both contribute to unhealthy relationships. Yeah, nice observation there. And how can these energetic patterns be most gracefully dissolved? So we need to do a healing for that. But before we do, so first I would like to describe. So if a person's dealing with that internally, if any of you are having that, then of course we'll work through that in a moment. But what I'm wanting to just bring up, because it's based on this healing that we just did, is that sometimes we're dealing with people who are stubborn and really don't want to change or evolve or be responsible or generous or capable or anything but grouchy and making trouble. Right? We've all known people like that at some point or another. So what do you do? The answer is that for every relationship, there is a sacred space in the heart. You can find it. The sacred gardens of the heart are formed out of templates, kind of archetypal universal templates, which are standard. Like there's a standard template for older brother, younger brother. And there's a standard template for mother and child. And there's a standard template for, you know, father and son versus father and daughter versus first cousins versus second cousins, et cetera, et cetera. So all of them are based on the most fundamental template, which is, I would say, giving appreciation and honor to Maharishi, who said that it was teacher-student. And I think he described, did he not describe that that could take various forms, right? Because like mother-child is also very much a teacher-student type of relationship. Mother's your first teacher, basically. So we could say mother-child, or we could say teacher-student type of relationship. That's like the fundamental. And what that does is it sets up a system whereby information expands. And that expansion of information is the fundamental of human existence. So we're kind of like working our way backwards here. We're kind of, what do they call that? Backwards technology or whatever. Or backwards programming it or whatever that. Thank you, reverse engineering. Thank you. Thank you to the scientists in the audience. Bless your hearts. Yeah, but you know what I was saying? It's like, okay, so there's this relationship between teacher and student or mother and child, something like that. And then if we go back deeper than that, what we find is, well, that allows for a transfer of knowledge. It allows knowledge to awaken. That's what it does. It allows knowledge to expand. And the whole premise behind human existence is that being is already fully expanded and it has nowhere to go. So what does it do? It creates human, and humans can represent, because of the boundaries and limitations on our nervous systems, it allows us to experience the expansion of knowledge and wisdom and consciousness. It allows us to expand, experience it. So that's what we do, we expand. So the archetypal relationship in the human condition is that relationship that has two parts, that lets one interact with the other for the sake of the expansion of information. Anyway, so there are all these archetypal forms, and at their finest level, and they're found in the causal level of the physiology. In this level, we can identify them, the specific different ones. And at a deeper level of causal body, we find them as archetypal templates. At denser, more manifest levels of the causal body, they're specified. Oh yeah, the relationship between Dorothy and her husband Tom, or the relationship between Dorothy and her mom, or all the different specifics, right? That's at a slightly denser level. But what I'm trying to say is that if you're facing a relationship with someone that's not going well, or doesn't seem to be a healthy relationship, you can follow it into the sacred garden of the heart, and you can go back and find, where is that space where it's just me and that other person, where the two of us reside together, and the two of us find ourselves as two portions of the same form. Because this is the premise behind the sacred gardens of the heart, is that it's one garden that two hearts occupy. So when the two hearts occupy one garden, they together make up that garden. The garden wouldn't have an existence if it weren't for both. Therefore, it is that's the spot where you can find that other person always, even if they have died and they're no longer in their body, or even if they're far away and you can't reach them, or even if the relationship is so damaged that you can't even talk to them, you can still find that place. You can find it in your heart where you're with that other person and the two of you are together as one being. Then, if there's a lot of damage in the relationship, it's possible to go to the archetypal form that's behind it. Say it's a form of like brother and sister, and maybe they don't get along. So you can go into that spot where the two reside together and then find that original archetypal form of the brother and sister who choose in a lifetime to come together to the same set of parents, have the same early childhood experiences, share the same TV shows, share the same meals, all that stuff. That level. And at that level, there is harmony. So now we have a gap. Just like before when I was talking about energy healing, how you have the symptom at the surface and we have the damage, or excuse me, the form of being of all solutions. And then the energy healing works in the gap between them like that. This is the same kind of thing. If we have a damaged relationship and we can find that sacred space where the relationship resides in its perfected form, then working the gap between those two is a matter of moving awareness delicately to find a point of balance. Because if there's damage, and if there's a form that's beautiful and there's a form that's not beautiful, then there's going to be a point in between those two forms. It's like a point of balance. And when we position our consciousness at that point of balance, then those two forms come together, they interact, got the dysfunction and the function interacting together, and they work out the dynamics of how that healing is going to happen. The healing is orchestrated by nature. It's orchestrated by the laws of nature, which are all the laws of nature are both constructive and destructive, right? We've got all those pairs of complementary opposites. And so what happens is we bring them together in that spot. And when we bring them together and we're in a state of balance, that is that delicate state. That is that point where you're moving, but you're not moving. Moving and non-moving at the same time. Infinitely silent, infinitely dynamic, together. And it feels like one isn't really doing anything. It just feels like whatever was unresolved goes into a place of resolution very gently and very tenderly. And at that level, the movement that takes place is so refined that it has universal implications. So the move that's going on inside your heart, that's going on for your relationships, is also going on at all the other levels of creation at the same time. So the whole field moves. So if for any reason the dysfunction in a relationship first arose because for whatever reason the environment allowed that to happen, it supported the dysfunction coming forward, then this move that's at a very, very delicate level of the heart, we could say. It's at a very delicate level of the heart, very delicate, finest level of feeling, that not only amends the problem that's in the relationship, but it shifts the entire environment around you and the other person so that the environment also supports a positive change or a positive outcome in the interactions with that person. It's a very tender way to deal with problems, but it also is very effective, and it blesses the whole creation as well as each individual. So I want to come back to that question, but I see we have a question up here too in the question answer box. So we'll see what, oh, hello. Hello, my darling. We have somebody from South America with us tonight. On the subject of expanding to universal self. Oh, this looks like a juicy question. Okay, so, oh, we have someone else coming on the chat saying thank you because she just can't stop crying because it's very sweet. So, I know, it's like very tender, isn't it? So here's a question from South America. In a romantic relationship, I have attachment to an exclusive relationship and find it's difficult to expand to include other persons. Scared of losing some quality if we're more inclusive. It's like wanting to share the unified field only with one person. Maybe we can dissipate these limitations. All right, beautiful point, beautiful point. So at the level of universal self, there is a quality of love that we would call universal. And so that quality of love is something that's present for everyone in every type of relationship, whether it's romantic or non-romantic or, family, parents, children, whatever. And that universal level of love is one that includes or embraces a sense of self with everyone. So what we're really loving, and it goes the same for a romantic relationship. When you love your lover, who are you loving? Who you're really loving is the being of all creation is loving itself through you. That's what's happening. Every experience we have, everything we do is being, loving itself, experiencing itself, understanding itself, tasting the relative through our instruments of our physiologies and our personalities and ourselves. So at the surface, there are lots of boundaries. And then at the fine level, there are no boundaries. So it's good to honor whatever boundaries are present at each of the different levels, because the boundaries are, we could say they're laws of nature. So at the superficial level of self, like in a romantic relationship, there are certain universal laws of nature that support an individual. I know not everyone may agree with me, but this is partly on my own personal perception and opinion, I guess I could say, but there are my experiences, and I have worked with a lot of people in a lot of relationships. My experience is that when it comes to romantic relationships, a degree of exclusiveness actually honors the depth, the potential depth that a romantic relationship can reach, which is unique to other relationships. So in other words, a romantic relationship has this potential to go, particularly over the course of time, like decades, to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And as far as I know, there's no limit. Maybe we could say, as in a relationship with other family members, that a relationship between mother and child could go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and there's no limit. Maybe, but there are limitations in certain relationships. There's certain like natural cultural taboos, you know, with family members, for example. And so because of that, there's certain places where the depth of relationship can't be explored. But in a romantic relationship, there are fewer boundaries that inhibit the individuals coming together to explore what real depth of relationship is. So because of that, there's a quality in a romantic relationship which is really special. It's different. It's different. It's precious. It's for the lifetime. And so in that relationship, I would say that, you know, it's like we're like a big tribe, right? All of us have lived, and many of us here in Fairfield, a lot of us have known each other long, long time, long, many, many years. And so, you know, there's definitely a depth that comes in those relationships, but there are also certain spots that you don't want to cross over without weakening the potential value of the romantic relationship. Does that make sense? Does it make sense? Does anybody have questions about that? Okay, let's see if I'm going to reread the question now and see if I answered it, how I answered it. She has attachment to exclusive relationship and find it's difficult to expand to include other persons. Yeah, so the thing is that your heart can always expand, always. You can always love everyone. I mean, I'll pass a squirrel in the forest, man, and like that moment, man, that squirrel is my best friend in the whole world, right? And they know it. And they know it. They come over and they're like, oh, you're so interesting. I love you. You know, I mean, it's like, wow. You know, I mean, it's not like I'm going to invite them into my house, you know, or hang out with them, but there is a fullness. There's a fullness on the level of the heart that's exquisite. It's delicious. It's amazing. And it's so amazing that it's universally recognized even by a squirrel that doesn't speak English or any other human language, right? So it's like, it's something real. It's real. I had a little baby bird come up to me the other day, and I got to pet it, just a little baby, you know? So it's very sweet that there can be a tender bond of love between individuals, you know, all kinds of, and rocks. I love my rocks. We love our gut bacteria, right? God bless our gut bacteria again and again. So, you know, there can be, and that can be, even that relationship, the relationship with your own gut bacteria can be so sweet and so tender and so enriching that it fills your life. That no matter what happens on the outside, you got stuck in traffic, or your favorite song didn't come on the radio, or you're late for an appointment, or whatever, because that relationship is there, life is okay. It's like mothers at home. It's like there's a quality of relationship that's going to keep you nourished and keep you protected and keep you adored and keep you, just keep you. Oh, you got it. Oh, thank you, darling. I wasn't sure if I said it right. And I wasn't sure if I was honoring, yes, that some people, I know there are a lot of different, it's like different styles of romantic relationships these days that move with different gender preferences and sexual orientations and stuff. So I don't want to not honor people who have specific preferences, because I just know that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, the divine being, is tasting this world through us. So some people are going to forge other kinds of like less exclusive relationships, and that's okay too, because everybody does what's right for them. Yes.
Ancestral and past life relationships. So I feel like they're kind of, I mean, they're not really, but on some level, maybe they're locked a bit in time or appear that way. So how do you expand on those? How do they get to deeper?
Thanks for the great question. So I'm not sure if the folks online for sure heard, because my mic's way over here. So the question was about ancestral and past life relationships. And because they're locked in time, how do we approach those? Thank you. I love this. And I'd like to just tie it into a particular point, because we just were talking about gut bacteria. So I'd like to connect it with that. And that is that it's all synchronous, you guys. We're really connected here. So the thing is that the way, each person's body is a little different. Like some people's bodies are naturally very thin, and they can eat practically anything they want, and doesn't seem to, cause excess weight. And other people can have to control themselves all the time, and they can't hardly eat anything, and they still are fighting that battle. And the place in the body where the food gets turned into energy is in the mitochondria. And the mitochondrial DNA is passed down from the mother side of the family, mother to daughter, mother to daughter, mother to daughter. So several weeks ago, I had an aha about this, and I thought, okay, I need to make sure all my relationships with all of my mothers, going back as far as I can, are in good shape. I need to make sure that we are friends, and that things are happy, and that everybody's loving everybody, and like that. And I went back and I found there were some bad spots, there were some rough spots back in that lineup. And so the causal level of the physiology, where the sacred gardens of the heart reside, are outside of space and time. So even if those individuals have long since let go of their physiologies, it is still possible to find the sacred space of your heart and their heart. So I went through to my mother, to her mother, to her mother, to her mother, as far back as I could comfortably go. And I checked in with each mom, and I bowed down to each mom, and I said, thank you for being responsible for making this body, this vehicle that I get to run around in. And right, because if it weren't for that, I would never know what yummy food tastes like or whatever. So, I mean, all the relative is for us to taste here. So, so I went back, and I think that's probably the main principle, is that the sacred gardens of the heart are outside of space-time, and therefore it is possible to connect with individuals even if they have long since left their physiologies. And of course, those souls are somewhere. They're either in the spirit world, or they've taken another physiology, or they could take a dense physiology like another human life, or they could take a subtle physiology like some kind of Davic incarnation, or they could go have a fire body and live on the sun, or they could have a body made of space and go live on Jupiter, or all the different kinds of physiologies. There are lots of physiologies out there, but wherever they are, it's that person. It's that precious soul who loved you, that they gave that part of themselves to another person, that eventually the combinations came down to this body. So as far as past lives go, this ties into the cosmic healing that we just did earlier. And remember when we were doing that healing earlier in the session, we were connecting into, this was when that really delicate movement was happening. And there was an integration between everything we know ourselves to be right here and right now, and that eternal, cosmic, yet manifest level of self. It's you as the galaxy, you as the stars, you as all the planets. If we feel inside our hearts, we can find our relationships with Saturn, relationship with Jupiter, relationship with the sun, we have relationships with all these beings. They have big round bodies, but they're still part of us, you know? And at that level, when we get into the sacred garden of the heart, it's not like two separate beings. It's really one being made of two souls. That's what it is. So at that level, we find ourselves as those cosmic bodies, and they're super wise. One of the reasons we did that healing was because it gives you access to a lot of useful information, cosmic information. And one of the things that's in there is that all those previous physiologies, when they were alive on the earth, if we talk just about, like, say, human past lives, we can use that as to kind of narrow it down a little bit. When those physiologies were on the earth, they were humming or resonating with a particular energy frequency. And that resonation went out into the world, into the environment, and it left its mark. It left its mark on the stones and on the plants and on the being, everybody else who is here, and the buildings and everything. Everything you felt in those past incarnations, those feelings are still carried like memories. All the experiences are carried like memories. Everything you learned, it's here. One time, I'm a flute player, but one time I was rehearsing with some string players, and I had this really strong feeling that I'd played strings in a past life. And one of the girls said, well, see if you can play this. And I picked it up, and I just went right up the scale. And it was like there was that part that was awake. It could still remember. I still remember the finger positions, even though I never picked up the instrument in this life, ever. They're different from the flute finger positions. Maybe I was cluing in with that cosmic level of my own intelligence that's also connected to, remember I was saying the three forms of mother are in our three Mahamarmas? The Saraswati element, which is that aspect of mother, the mother that masters all the arts, that she was there, that part was able to, like, manifest through this instrument in order to be able to just know where the fingers went and in tune, you know? But anyway, that doesn't matter. It's not important. That's not important. What's important is that when the past life suffered or had a trauma or made a vow or something, sometimes in past lives we make like vows of celibacy or vows of obedience or vows of poverty or something like that, then it is necessary to interact with the past physiology, the past self. And what we do is we can find the resonation of the past incarnation or physiology in this world because it's still here. It still sits in the environment, it still sits in the space. So you can find it just like you find a sacred garden of the heart with someone you love. You can find a sacred space with any of your different past incarnations and then interact with that incarnation. And it's always a pleasure because it's like tightening up your team. You know, if you have a past life that maybe is in some kind of opposed position to where you are right now, you know, maybe in this lifetime you feel that creating wealth is actually a privilege and an honor, and it's a way of blessing the creation and blessing others. Whereas in a past life, you thought that money was dirty and that spiritual people actually always were poor, and that poverty was an expression of spiritual development and things like that. So we have, like, say, opposed positioning. Then it's possible to go back and not even to convince the other part of yourself to change its position. It doesn't have to change its position. It just needs to hold its position with honor so that you can be, in this lifetime, you can live your dharma now, what you're supposed to live. Because it's gentle. It's gentle. We're not trying to make anybody do anything. Even our past lives, we're not trying to make them do anything. We just want them to be happy. Wherever you are right now is in a more evolved state than the past life. So any interaction will uplift naturally. All right. Not to necessarily dwell on past lives, right? But to just use that as an opportunity to harmonize the feeling. If the past life, or even your younger self, You know, if we were hard on ourselves when we were young, maybe we were very judgmental, or I sure was. You know, when I was a teenager, I was like, if I'm not absolutely perfect, like absolutely perfect, then I'm no good, you know? I was like, so my little past teenage self was like, wow, I'm really being judged a lot over here. And so at this point, I can go back to my teenage self and hold her in my arms and say, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be anything. I love you. I just love you. I hold you. I love you. I protect you. And you can just feel when you do a little exercise like that, you can just feel everything kind of release and relax. And that part of the self gets on board with this part. It's like, you know what, I'm safe. Okay. Teenage self goes, okay, I'm safe now. I don't have to be too hard on myself. It's okay. What about low self-esteem and the need for approval? So low self-esteem and need for approval comes from actually self-judgment, expectations, having assumptions about oneself like that. So ultimately the solution, of course, is to, maybe we should do that as a exercise or a healing. We could do that as a healing. Let's take a minute. That's a good idea. When we do a healing where we interact with ourself in the past, and in this case, what we want to do is we want to open up at the causal level, the physiology, ourself through all of time, not just this physiology, but who we've always been, who we've ever been. Maybe this lifetime, one gender, last lifetime, another gender, or whatever, however we want to do it. The mind becomes quiet. Now, for some people in the group, I know that some people's minds become quiet really super quick and easy. For other people, maybe not so sure how that happens. So what I'd like to suggest for people, if you're not sure how to get your mind into a quiet space, when I say quiet, what I mean is awareness is settling down in those layers from more dense to more delicate, more subtle, because the subtler levels of consciousness are quieter, right? So if you're not sure, start by closing the eyes. Because when we close the eyes, that takes us out of that relative activity of eyesight at least. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing that's really helpful to do in an exercise like this, if it's comfortable, you don't have to, is get your hands up over your heart area. Because I love putting my hands over my heart area. So fascinating. Putting the hands, wherever we put the hands, helps focus attention on that spot. So that's a way of, it's like putting your microscope on or something, getting your telescope on or something. You put your hands over the heart and you can feel what's actually going on in the heart area. The heart is the seat of feeling in the body. And when I say feeling, I mean emotion. Feel the feeling that's in your heart. Feel how beautiful you are. Everybody's love is so beautiful. And it's so much more enriching to you than it is to anybody, or than anybody else's love is to you, because you know you. Your love comes to you completely unconditionally. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to picture yourself at any time in your life where you felt not good enough, unacceptable, weak, challenged, damaged, any point. And imagine you're holding yourself in that sweet embrace of love. You're just saying, I love you, I forgive you, I see you, I accept you exactly as you are. You are precious to me, infinitely precious. There are no words of how precious you are. There are no words. You are no words. You are precious. Right there. And notice how when we let our attention kind of go out to a former self or out to another earlier version of self, a loop is created that comes back to this self. And you can feel, if you've got your hands over your heart, you're probably feeling that the feeling in that area is changing. It's becoming even softer and even more profound, even more intense, even more sweet. And for those who want to just let their awareness fall into absolute silence, absolute silence rolls that sweetness out to infinity. And the embrace is an embrace of love to infinity that brings in every moment in every life. It brings in the whole field of creation. You're so beautiful. All right, let's open our eyes. Okay, now notice how you feel right now. Notice even we're not doing the exercise. Maybe a few people are still doing the exercise. Take your time, no rush. You can do this like, you can do it all night long, You can just, it's very nice. It's not something that can be overdone because it's happening at a very cosmic level of self. It's happening at a universal level. So it only benefits at everyone. You're all so sweet and so beautiful. Again, it's created this just lovely wave of softness going out into the field of creation. Softness and silence is so beautiful. Okay, thank you. So another question. Thank you for exploring the archetype of husband and wife relationship. There are so many culturally determined aspects that sometimes getting to the essence of this particular archetype is hard to grasp. As you were speaking about it, it warmed my heart. Thank you. Beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I've been looking at the finest level of mechanics of the male-female relationship paradigm because we have a lot of teenagers around here, bouncy teenagers. I know they're just so full of life force. But they're also unshielded. When people are little people, they don't have a lot of shielding up. And it's a funny thing that in a romantic relationship, the man and woman come together after all the shieldings are already up and they have to kind of like work through, they have to kind of wend their way through that shielding in order to get into that inner space with each other and really have a very authentic level of relationship. But then ironically, after they've done that, then they have children, and then they get to see the being without all the cumbersome shielding and agendas and whatever stuff. Yeah, without the shielding, the distinctive energies that define differences at a very subtle level between, and I'm going to talk about complementary pairs of opposites here because this doesn't have to do with gender preference or sexual preference, because people have the right to be, people inside can feel any different way, and that's completely valid. But this is more about the way these sort of complementary opposites work together. And what I'm thinking of here is that very deepest, this is a very beautiful, powerful place to end our meeting, I think, is the difference between unmanifest being that's folded in on its own nature and completely silent and qualityless versus unmanifest being which is awake to its own nature and is sort of activated, you could say, but has not yet expressed itself. Both are infinite. Both are fundamental to everything in creation, but they're really different from one another. And for us as energy healers, the important spot is between them. It's that point between which is responsible for the bringing forth of the resources which we use to heal ourselves and our relationships. And everybody has a little bit, everybody's a mix. We all have some female features, some male. We've all lived many times different kinds of physiology. So being does that. It takes a single soul and it tastes what life is like as male. It tastes what life is like as female and so forth. Because it's important to go through that anytime we're talking about archetypes. In fact, it's important to go through that many, many times from many different angles. The whole premise behind archetypes is that there are certain truths about our reality that are so profound, so universal, so vast, that in a single human lifetime, it's very, very difficult to fully integrate that feature. Like if we think of like archetypal stories, I've talked a lot about the divine dialogue and the hero's journey, which is an archetypal story. That story is so profound that it's taken hundreds of thousands of years, maybe at least tens of thousands of years, for our culture to adapt the stories that actually bring out that truth in the purest form possible. It goes over many, many generations. This is not a single generation project. This is a multi-generation project, and all archetypes are like that. So your question is well put, because you know that point that that relationship is so profound that it's, you know, it can require a deep dive to really comprehend it in its totality. And the secret to doing that comes from not focusing specifically on one side or the other, male or female, but finding that spot in the middle. It's the interaction of the two that gives rise to the magic, you could say. And it's the interaction between that silence folded in on itself and silence awake to its own nature, right when it transforms from the one to the other. That's the spot where mother is at home and all the softness of the universe is at hand, and it is present as your being, because that point of transformation is the seed of the human condition, and our human condition is a condition of expansion of consciousness. That's what we do. That's what we're here for, is to expand our being. We experience new things every day, and every day we experience something new, we learn something new, and every time we learn something new, we're expanding. So it's like, it loops around, then from that new expanded space, we have a new experience, and it just keeps going. It's so sweet. All right. So I see we've come to our hour. I would like to just say that I know that I don't know if that really was a complete resolution, but as many of you know, oh, thank you, dear. A raised hand from Canada, from Montreal. As you know, oh, thank you, more raised hands. Oh, so usually Friday night is a setup for Saturday morning. Oh, more raised hands. So you guys are the best. Thank you. I love you all dearly. This has been a really fun ride tonight. I feel like we had a ride of the heart. That's what it felt like. It was like from one moment to the next, the feeling, oh, Jen is saying that it was truly amazing. So from one moment to the next, we're like exploring the landscape of consciousness at this very deep level. And that's what I wanted this webinar to be about. I wanted us to have a chance to get in, and as a collective, each of us from our own perspectives, you know, get to look at that together. So it's like a diamond or a crystal or something that when you have many facets, then the whole thing shines. And so together we went and we explored all these different little nooks and crannies of the causal level of creation, all the sacred gardens of the heart, and the way that we would use our love both in a self-referral manner where we're interacting with our own nature, and also at a collective level as our whole big collective. When we were sending our waves of love out to Mother Divine at the beginning of our session, you know, we can looking at it from lots of different, all the different axes, right? So anyway, if you have any questions about the axes, I just uploaded a video about them on Thursday, and another video comes up on Sunday. Is a healing for kidneys. Just saying. And I'd like to thank everybody. Thank you all. You're so precious. And I'm going to close the show. Bye. Bye. See you all soon. We'll see you tomorrow, a lot of you. Thank you. Have a beautiful evening. And if you're in Europe, have the beautiful rest of your sleep. I love you. I know, right? It's like, oh my God, you're so dear to get up in the middle of the night to listen to this. Thank you. Bye.